Phylum Arthropoda. This phylum is perhaps the most successful phylum of life that has ever existed on Earth. 85% of all species, not 85% of animals, 85% of all species belong to this phylum. Like tardigrades and roundworms, they undergo molting and ecdysis as they grow. The word arthropod means jointed feet, a characteristic of all members has a structural and functional segmentation. All arthropods have a chitinous exoskeleton, which is waterproof. If you recall from the fungi chapter, chitin makes up the cell walls of fungi and also makes up the arthropod exoskeletons of arthropods and roundworms. This is evidence of common ancestry between fungi and animals. Evidence of arthropods go back before the Cambrian and consists of the following subphyla: Trilobita, an extinct but rather large group, and the others that we're going to look at next. But before we get into that, let's take a look at basic arthropod morphology. Arthropods have jointed appendages, body segmentation, and a chitinized exoskeleton. This segmentation gives rise to specialized body regions called tagmata. Examples include the head, thorax, abdomen, cephalothorax, and trunk, all of which depends on which group the arthropods belong to. Jointed appendages serve the function of movement, capture, and manipulation of food, sensing the environment, digging, and mating. Arthropods have a hemocoel, which is a body cavity that fills with blood from blood vessels and delivers nutrients, waste, and gas exchange. This system is not pressurized and is therefore an open circulatory system. Excretion is done using malpighian tubules in insects or green glands in crustaceans. The nervous system is controlled by a large ganglia attached to sensory structures like eyes and antennae. There is a large ventral nerve cord that runs the length of the body. Respiration varies depending on the arthropod's habitat and habits. Insects and myriapods have several tubes called tracheae that branch and perform gas exchange directly between the air and cells within the organism. Major tracheae open to the surface of the exoskeleton via spiracles. This form of gas exchange is the reason why insects are so small. Aquatic crustaceans and chelicerates use gills, whilst terrestrial chelicerates have book lungs. Book lungs are called this because they have several pages that flap to allow for greater surface area of gas exchange. The cuticle is a hard covering known as an exoskeleton, which is made up of chitin. The epicuticle is thin, waxy, and water-resistant with no chitin. The chitinous procuticle is below and is much thicker. The cuticle provides protection without sacrificing flexibility. As you might know, some bugs are hard to squish. Regardless, all arthropods grow by molting and shedding, called ecdysis, removing the cuticle as they grow. So let's get into the major groups of living arthropods. Just wanted to warn anybody that if you have fear of creepy crawlies, some of these pictures might disturb you. This first one is Subphylum Myriapods: spiders, scorpions, mites, and horseshoe crabs. There's over 77,000 species that have been discovered. This group has two tagmata, a prosoma region, also known as its head, and an ophistoma, also known as its abdomen. And this group is named for the first set of appendages called the chelicerae. These are modified legs, not mandibles, as seen in other arthropods. Chelicerates do not have antennae. Instead, this sensory structure is replaced with pedipalps, which can be used for sensing the environment and for manipulating food. Spiders have specialized chelicerae for producing venom to inject in prey before feeding. For horseshoe crabs, the book lungs have been modified as gills, and the majority of chelicerates are terrestrial, having book lungs. Chelicerates have a brain with two ventral nerve cords. Chelicerates are also dioecious, with both external fertilization in aquatic environments and internal fertilization in terrestrial environments. Some chelicerates provide parental care for offspring, especially spiders, as seen here. So what makes up these groups? Spiders take up the majority of chelicerates. While spiders are venomous, most have fangs too small to penetrate our skin, or the venom that they produce is too low in dose to affect us. Although brown recluses and black widows are the most venomous to people, immediate medical treatment tends to deter the effects. Spiders are extremely useful as pest control in the house and garden, and while they may look scary, they would actually much rather avoid you and will oftentimes go in the opposite direction if they see you. Spider silk is so strong that it may be stronger than a cable-like material called Kevlar. That if you were to take spider silk at the same thickness as Kevlar, it would be just as strong, if not stronger. Daddy longlegs, are also called harvestmen, are noted for the small body and the really long legs. They are scavengers and predators of smaller insects. Scorpions are known for having a toxic stinger and a chelicerae modified in the claws. Some scorpions appear thinner. You call these whip scorpions. And if you're a fan of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, this was featured during the 3 Unforgivable Curses scene in that movie. Ticks are predators of blood in mammals, with many carrying diseases like Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Mites are mostly harmless and scavengers with a few parasitic species. It is likely that you have mites that live in your skin
That eat dead skin cells and lay eggs in your pores.
Don't worry, that's normal, and a great example of commensalism. Dust mites can cause allergies in those that are sensitive with their waste products. Horseshoe crabs are by far one of my favorite animals, remaining unchanged since before the dinosaurs. These intertidal species come out each spring to breed in large droves. They have blue blood since copper replaces iron as the oxygen capture molecule. This blood has been used to make contact lenses and to test medicines and vaccines for infections. They have a large tail called a telson, which simply serves to flip the animal if it's sent upside down. These guys are completely harmless, but certainly an interesting part of life. This next group is Subphylum Myriapoda, which consists of centipedes and millipedes. They have 2 tagmata, a head, and a really long trunk region that has uniramous appendages. Uniramous means the appendages do not branch. All of these are terrestrial organisms. Now, before you judge me, I do not like to see these things, so we're going to use some cutesy little photos instead. So this one here represents a millipede. Millipedes were likely one of the first terrestrial animals on Earth. They can have as many as 11 to 100 segments, each containing 2 pairs of appendages. Only 1 pair per appendage is present on centipedes. Each segment is a fusion of 2 segments, which explains the 2 pairs of legs. Millipedes are also more round in cross-section. You can find millipedes worldwide under leaf litter, soils, and decaying logs. They have a thin epicuticle, so they must remain in moist habitats to prevent desiccation. They can roll themselves into a ball also to prevent desiccation or defend themselves. Millipedes are more herbivorous and feed on decaying plant matter. Their mandibles function in scraping and chewing. They are poisonous because they produce hydrogen cyanide, which ward off most predators. In terms of reproduction, male millipedes transfer sperm to female millipedes via specialized regions in their trunks. Eggs are fertilized and then eggs are laid. Once hatched, they attain more segments and the legs with each molt. Centipedes are nocturnal and walk along forest floor, rocks, logs, and search for prey. Unlike millipedes, they have only 1 pair of legs per segment, and the last pair is a sensory appendage. Like millipedes, their thin epicuticle requires them to be in moist habitats such as under rocks and logs. Centipedes are venomous, but rarely toxic or fatal to humans. They use venom to paralyze prey and utilize large mouth appendages to hold and capture prey. Mating may occur through courtship, in which the male uses a web to attract females, and he leads her to a spermatophore, which is basically a packet of sperm on a stalk, and that sperm is then used to enter into the female to help fertilize the eggs. Eggs are laid on land where females may wrap themselves around them to protect them, or they may be deposited in the soil. Young appear as adults, but with fewer legs and segments. They gain those as they grow older. Crustaceans are the most dominant aquatic arthropods, with 77,000 species. One group of terrestrial crustaceans is the isopods, also known as woodlice, roly-polies, and pillbugs. Crustaceans have two pairs of antennae, mandibles as mouthparts, and biramous appendages, where the appendage splits into two parts at the end. Uniramous appendages lack this splitting, and those are found in insects and the myriapods. Crustaceans have a head and thorax fused to form a cephalothorax, which is covered by a carapace. The other tegmata is the abdomen. In addition to a chitinous exoskeleton that must be shed, crustaceans can also take up calcium carbonate and infuse it into the exoskeleton to make it stronger. Most crustaceans are dioecious, except barnacles, where they switch sexes depending on timing. Crustaceans have a brain made by a fusion of the first three segmental ganglia. They have compound eyes and two pairs of antennae. Diets vary depending on the species, but many of these organisms end up on our plates. Did you know lobsters were once considered a poor person's food and now a delicacy in many parts of the world? The largest crayfish in the world is a bottlebrush crayfish endemic to Kentucky and Tennessee. In fact, Kentucky is home to 100 different species of crayfish. Along the east coast of the United States, crab cakes are mostly made with Atlantic blue crab. If you go to the west coast, they use Dungeness crab. The largest arthropods are the coconut crab and the Japanese spider crab. Pillbugs, or roly-polies, are the only fully terrestrial crustacean and may share ancestry with millipedes, centipedes, and insects. Despite their appearance, with the shell and the sessile lifestyle, barnacles are in fact a crustacean with legs modified for filter feeding. The largest subphylum of arthropods, or any taxonomic grouping in the world, are the insects, named for having three pairs of legs. They have three tegmata, the head, thorax, and abdomen. They also have specialized mouth parts, and most species have wings. All mouth parts derive from modified legs of ancestors. Insects also have one pair of antennae and sensory organs like compound eyes or simple eyes and sensory hairs. Wings are found in most insects, and while they share the same function as vertebrate wings, this is an example of analogous structures. Vertebrate wings evolved from modifications of the front legs. Insect wings likely derive from modified gill arches and may have played a role initially as a means of thermoregulation and escaping predators. Many insects, especially bees and ants and hornets, are quite social, using special social pheromones to communicate with one another. Many insects have complete metamorphosis, where the offspring differ widely in appearance and food habits to help prevent competition. The diversity of insects is likely owed to the legs, mouthparts, and wings. Many insects have evolved alongside plants as pollinators, with some insects specifically targeting certain plants for pollination based on coloration. For example, bees can see in UV light, allowing them to see coloration that's not actually seen by our own eyes. Butterflies tend to like bright reds and oranges, while flies like white to discolored plants and even plants that smell like rotten meat. In ants, termites, and bees are very hierarchical, with queens and workers and soldiers. Many of these insects that we see today are so important not only to the food that's produced by them, but also the role they play in the ecosystems of other organisms. In our next video, we will be looking at Subphylum Deuterostomia, which includes echinoderms, and our phylum, the chordates.